Imagine walking into a voting booth on May 19th, pulling the lever for a candidate you believe in, and finding out your vote could just be deleted by a politician's pen 5 days later. We are looking at a live scenario right now in Alabama, where the fundamental act of voting is being treated not as a final decision, but as a rough draft.
Alabama has effectively hit the reset button on its entire 2026 election. State leaders quietly built a legislative bridge to bypass the Supreme Court and invalidate votes that have already been cast. It is a contingency plan engineered entirely to ignore court-ordered fairness, and it's happening right under our noses.
We are watching a state scramble to revert to electoral maps that were already thrown out for being racially discriminatory. The sheer tension of this is wild. The state is essentially telling voters their district might evaporate overnight if a higher court grants permission to switch the maps back. It fundamentally questions whether voters pick their politicians or politicians pick their voters.
The desperation to get this legal architecture in place was so intense, it created one of the most surreal moments in modern political history. While the Alabama State House was literally flooding with rainwater, while fire alarms were screaming and security was trying to evacuate people, lawmakers flat out refused to leave. They stayed inside a sinking building with water pooling around them just to pass this emergency election override.
The result of that frantic session was two specific pieces of legislation, HB 1 and SB 1. They are designed to do exactly one thing: trigger a special election that vaporizes the current court-ordered maps and restores the old discarded ones the very second a federal court gives them permission. If they get the green light, any results from the regular primary are completely nullified.
The catalyst for this entire political earthquake was a quiet, recent Supreme Court ruling out of Louisiana. The Callais decision fundamentally recalibrated the evidentiary standards for the Voting Rights Act. It completely changed the rules of the game mid-season, and state leaders recognized a massive immediate opening.
Under the old standard, the focus was entirely on impact. Did the map dilute minority votes? Simple enough. But this new standard requires something called disentanglement. Plaintiffs now have to prove that race, and not just partisan politics, drove the map lines. In a region where race and political affiliation are deeply intertwined, it suddenly became massively harder for voters to prove their powers being diluted. This gave Alabama's Republican leadership a golden opportunity to claim their discarded maps were just about protecting conservative seats.
Lawmakers instantly recognized this loophole. Democratic Representative Terry Swell called it a devastating blow to the Voting Rights Act, while Republican Attorney General Steve Marshall basically saw a brand new legal pathway. He immediately demanded the courts lift the current injunctions so Alabama can get a second bite at the apple.
The timeline of this is just absolute frantic absurdity. They rush into a special session, pass bills in a flooding statehouse, and set a hard deadline to secure a Supreme Court blessing to change the maps just 5 days before an election where absentee voting is already well underway. They are racing against the clock.
But there is a hidden mechanism here that almost all the media coverage completely missed. It's a quiet chain reaction that completely upends how democracy usually functions in the state. If the federal court vacates the injunction, the governor calls a special election. But step 3 is the kicker. Traditional primary runoffs are eliminated. Whoever gets a simple plurality of the votes takes the nomination.
Critics are calling this the plurality poison pill. By killing off the primary runoffs, a fringe candidate could potentially snatch the party nomination with just 20 or 30% of the vote in a chaotic, crowded special election field. It completely removes the mandate of a majority and radically alters who actually gets to the general election ballot.
Pause for a second and think about the financial reality of this. State leaders are gambling over $5 million of taxpayer money to fund this duplicate, backup election infrastructure, reimbursing counties for extra poll workers, printing extra ballots, all just in case the courts let them move backward.
The real prize in this incredibly expensive game of roulette is the 2nd Congressional District. Under the court-ordered map, it was transformed into a near-majority black district, currently represented by a black Democrat. Republican state leaders desperately want to flip that district back to red to hold 7 of the state's 8 congressional seats.
Make no mistake, this isn't some isolated local dispute. We are looking at a highly coordinated Southern strategy. Louisiana is postponing its congressional primary. Tennessee is breaking up districts in Memphis. National political figures are looking directly at these states, using this new Supreme Court precedent to legally maneuver their way into keeping control of the U.S. House.
If the Supreme Court actually greenlights this, the local chaos will be spectacular. Take the Barfoot-Hatcher swap. You have a Republican and a Democratic state senator who literally swapped territories to stay with their constituents when the maps changed last year. If these new bills trigger, those senators suddenly have 48 hours to scramble back and refile for their original seats. It's a total administrative nightmare for everyone involved.
You would logically think this last-minute maneuver is completely illegal under the Purcell Principle. That's a well-established legal doctrine explicitly designed to stop courts from confusing voters right before they head to the polls. The whole point of Purcell is to prevent exactly this kind of late-stage disruption when absentee ballots have already been mailed out.
The sheer, visceral irony here is staggering. In 2022, the Supreme Court ruled Alabama had to use a challenged map strictly because it was, quote, too close to the election to change it. Now, Alabama's utilizing the exact inverse of that logic, asking the Supreme Court to rip up the current maps just 5 days before the primary. Watch very closely what happens next. The Supreme Court is likely going to ignore Purcell entirely, grant Alabama's request, and prove that the rules of the system are entirely flexible depending on who benefits. Critics are likening the legal system to a massive game of Calvin ball where rules are just invented on the fly to ensure a specific outcome. We are witnessing a massive stress test of American election infrastructure in real time. I want to hear your specific prediction on how the court handles this last-minute map swap. Are we watching a brilliant flex of state sovereignty by lawmakers fighting for their maps, or a calculated, incredibly expensive attack designed to nullify an election already in progress? Drop your forecast in the comments below.
An investment in knowledge pays the best interest, so why not invest in this channel? Click like and subscribe for more.